Good morning or good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. This morning, we're going to be covering Qumulo Snapshots Best Practices to enable all of you to best implement and manage snapshots in your environments. We have Joe Costa, a solutions architect here at Qumulo, and Will Stroh, principal customer success engineer, presenting this morning. And I'm sure you guys are all familiar with them from your Slack conversations. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Joe and Will.
Hello, I'm Joe.
And I'm Will.
All right. So we're going to be talking about snapshots in general and go over how to implement them. A lot of the stuff might be review for you guys, but hopefully you can learn something new here. So let's get started. All right. So what is a snapshot? So a snapshot is a read-only point-in-time consistent view into part or all of the file system. So it's what the file system looked like at some point in time. And a snapshot will contain all the changes that differ from the current state of the file system. So it is basically a pointer to the active file system. And snapshots will include the directory tree structure, all of the file data as it existed at that time, and then all the files metadata. So all the permissions and attributes like change time and all that other stuff is included in a snapshot. So what is the point of a snapshot? Snapshots exist primarily to protect against user error. Somebody deletes a file they didn't intend to delete. They overwrite a file. It is a safety net for unintended file system changes. You accidentally deleted an entire directory tree. Snapshots can help you bring that data back. It's a safety net for intended file system changes that were misguided. Perhaps you made a bunch of changes or moved a bunch of stuff around you didn't intend to, where snapshots can help you get that data back in the original state. Snapshots can be used for archival, so you understand you have a copy of what the data looked like at some time when you can revert, particularly useful if you want to restore a project back for one of your end users. And again, it's a point-in-time recovery. You can go back however many days, however many hours or minutes, and get your data back the way you used to look.
Now, one thing snapshots are not
yes,
is a
for sure.
replacement for backups. We see this often in the ECS land where someone will delete something and we can go back to a snapshot and get it. That's fine. What we don't like to see is my cluster was caught in a fire. I can use my snapshots, correct? No. As Joe pointed out, they are a point in time to the active file system. The active file system resides on the drives that are inside the cluster itself. So just because you have snapshots does not mean you do not need to keep backups. It is highly, highly recommended. Keep those separate, and even better yet, keep them off-site for when you do have the inevitable situation that does make everyone a sad day.
When a meteor hits your data center, you will be protected. Maybe not you if you're in the data center, but your data will be.
I have a very good insurance policy, so if you do see a meteor, please let me know so I can record it and set my wife up for life.
So this vaguely confusing graph we got on the screen here kind of explains the concept behind how much data gets used by a snapshot. So what we have in blue here is a file. So we have a 10 meg file. This is the entire byte range that is consumed by that particular file. At some point in time, you've made some changes that take up these bytes here on this file. So what you have in the snapshot will be the original file. And then what is actually in the live version, what you see is this representation here. So it's the original bytes plus the modified bytes. And this is what's on the live version of the file system. Now, the actual consumed capacity in this case is going to be basically the original file and the new data. So we don't make another whole copy of the file, and we don't basically store both of these guys. We don't store 20 megabytes of stuff. We are storing now 11 megabytes of stuff, the original file and your changes. And this will go on and on and on as the snapshots are taken in your file system. So I think it's really useful to understand that snapshots themselves consume zero space until the data that is covered by that snapshot changes. So if you take 1,000 snapshots and nothing ever changes on your file system, then you have zero capacity being used in snapshots.
And to, I guess, to tack on to that point, we can jump back there real quick, Joe.
Yes, sir.
It's key to realize we have that use 10 megs space up there. As Joe stated, that was a file. Let's say that's multiple files. That's fine as well. It is not snapshots are not file based. They are block based. So the changes out there, unless I have a strictly file that's taking up a 4K block out there, when I take that snapshot, I am only tracking those change blocks. So regardless of if you have a terabyte file or 10 meg file, it's still only going to be the same change blocks that you're worried about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they're pretty efficient as far as the space consumption is. So there's some basic limitations of our snapshots. The primary of which would be that you can have a total of 40,000 total snapshots taken into the system. That might seem like a lot, but we do have customers that have hit this limit in the past. If you find yourself hitting that limit, we can have some conversations with you and understand exactly how you're using snapshots. In most occasions, we've seen the number of snapshots being exceeded has been because the way snapshots are being taken and the policies were a bit kind of out of line of what the actual coverage needs would have been, and we worked on that. But in some cases, the thing about snapshots is that your replication system that we use to move data between Qumulo clusters does take advantage of snapshots, or actually uses and requires snapshots. So there's a possibility that the replication that you have, all the policies will be taking snapshots and, again, be incrementing this number. In any case, 40,000 is quite a few snapshots that you can, if you hit that limit, let us know and we'll work with you and see if there's a code change that needs to happen, or if we just need to kind of rework the way your configuration is for your snapshots. Now, there is no limit on the number of policies you can add per directory. So you can have as many policies as you want, but these policies will generate snapshots. So you need to be mindful of that. This is Will's favorite topic. How much space does a snapshot consume? So this is a surprisingly difficult question to answer, but we're going to do the best we can here to cover that. So again, a snapshot only consumes space when the data covered by the snapshot is deleted or overwritten. So no changes, no space being used. And these data overwrites will only increase the capacity consumed by the number of bytes changed. Now, the smallest bytes changed in our product is 4K, because that's a 4K block behind the scenes. But that's the most increment, or the least amount of increment that we can do. This is how granular snapshots can be. They can be as much as, or as little as 4 kilobytes in difference. We don't change the entire file. You want to have a go, Will, with this one?
So here we have a couple commands we can run to see how much space is being consumed by snapshots. Mm-hmm. You'll notice the same command, just the second one has some JQ mastery behind it. That top one is looking through and doing exactly what it says. Again, the capacity used per snapshot. The second one does the exact same thing, but in this case, we're doing the top 5 snapshots in the system if you wanted to go down that road. So if anyone wants to screenshot this, feel free to.
We can make this available for you later. So it's not important that you furiously type this stuff now. So let's take a look at this live here. So I'm actually going to grab this command right from my presentation, and I'm going to pop into my cluster here. So I'm logged into one of my nodes. These commands, you can run them remotely through the QQ CLI, but in this case, I'm actually just SSH into my one node little VM cluster here. So I'm already logged in to the QQ CLI, and I'll just go ahead and paste that. And whoop, I missed a thing in the end right there. So this guy is telling me my top 5. That's what the number in the end is. So it's basically showing me my top 5 snapshots. So you can take this number if you have a cluster that has a great many snapshots. You can just modify that number to fit. And these guys would be stack ranked from smallest to largest of how much capacity is being used by the snapshots. So this is kind of a quick way to take a look at that. I think if I run the command by itself, snapshot get capacity used by snapshot, I just get kind of a blurb of JSON that might not be as easy for a human to understand as adding a little bit of JQ foo in the end right there. So this is one way to figure out how much space is being consumed, and we can talk about some more techniques here. In the UI of your cluster, you do have on the donut here, there is a graph that tracks the number of snapshots that you have. So you have the ability to understand the total consumption of snapshots, which is obviously really quite important when you're getting to the limit of how much space you have left on your cluster. And this is when knowing how much space your snapshots are consuming becomes really important, because you got to start deleting some of these snapshots. So this command kind of gives you a quick and dirty way to take a look and see how much your top 5 snapshots are consuming. So hopefully this makes sense here. Now we do have a script that will kind of go through and sort of collect all the different snapshots and give you some more info. But this actually, for most of our customers, this kind of just gets quick and dirty and gets you the info that you need. And you have the snapshot ID, which you need if you want to delete the snapshot via the CLI. But these ID numbers here also correspond to the ID numbers in the UI here. So if I go to save snapshots, you see these numbers kind of relate. So this first number is an ever incrementing number that keeps increasing as the snapshots are taken. So you're never going to see a snapshot 1 again in a cluster. They just keep growing and growing and growing. But you can use that ID number to sort of identify the 2. So if I wanted to delete my largest snapshot, I'll look for ID 2, go to ID 2 here, which is this guy, and then I'll just click the trash can icon to delete. So that's a quick way to do that. Let's go back to the Prezzo here.
As Joe mentioned, if you need something fancier than what's offered within the Qumulo command line itself, there are some scripts that the CS folks have thrown together. Just reach out in your Slack channel. We can get those over to you. That's not really an issue. It's just a little bit more than you'd want to try typing on the screen here.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go to delete snapshots, this is a common question that we see is, why am I not seeing this space come back immediately? Now, we know from how a snapshot's taken, it's simply a pointer block to the active file system and then a delta change of data rolled over there. The cluster itself, its primary purpose in life is to serve data. Therefore, any snapshot operations for cleanup, which we lovingly refer to as a garbage collector, those are low priority processes. They will not be instantaneous. As such, we typically see it take place over, if you were to delete, say, a terabyte of data, you'd probably see that take place over the next 15, 30 minutes. It would free up. And you'd see that represented in the capacity donut on the GUI there. You can run an API command to see what your current file system stats are at. But those would be slowly freed up over time. Now, one thing that we do have to do is we have to reconcile the data that's referenced by the snapshot to the rest of the data on the file system. So if we go back to Joe's example here, if you can bring up your GUI there again, Joe. So if we're deleting things in the SMB stuff directory, for example, we have, 10 snapshots out there, possibly more. If I go off and delete snapshot 12, I have to reconcile the data that is unique only to snapshot 12. If it is shared by previous snapshots, I can't delete that data, or I can't free that data, because it is still referenced by those other snapshots. When you go to delete snapshots, the best thing we can say is always go with the oldest first, because that's going to make it easiest as far as reconciliation is concerned, because all it has to do is compare it to the next snapshot up in line. Say, is this data in here? Cool, great, delete it. If not, keep it around. If you are in a state where you're trying to delete these ones in the middle, odds are your freed space is going to be very minimal. Typically the only time you'd see something that is unique to, again, say snapshot 12 there, and we're doing these on a 5-minute basis, is if it was created and then deleted within the time span of those other snapshots being taken. So again, if you are experiencing large usage, go for the oldest ones out there. There's not a lot to be gained by going for the middle ground ones.
Very good advice. And then the middle point right there is really quite important. We have to understand that you can have multiple policies covering the same directory, and these policies could have different frequencies. Like I can have a daily snapshot that snaps a directory, and I can have a minute snapshot that snapshots the same directory. So if a piece of data is covered by more than one snapshot, we can't reclaim that space until all the snapshots that cover that data are deleted. So this is something that catches customers out in the field quite a bit too. And then to Will's point, always delete the oldest snapshot first. Anything on the Q&A right now, Mandy?
Yeah, we actually do have a few questions. One of the questions we have so far is there a way to get the number of snapshots taken from the CLI?
The total number?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure we can, because we can do the QQ snapshot list. Oh, by the way, before I get too far with this whole QQ shenanigans here, every time I'm looking for some kind of command, I always do a QQ-H, which dumps all the commands that are available to you, and I pipe them to grep for the term that I'm interested in. And you can see there's quite a few commands, and even though me and Will have been doing this for a while, we're not going to remember all these commands, right? So what I want is I want to list all the snapshots. So in here, there's a snapshot list snapshots, I believe. So let's do that. So QQ snapshot list snapshots, and you're going to get a big giant JSON blurb that you can manipulate to heart's content. But this is basically going to have all the entries here. So I guess in theory, if I wanted to get a little JQ-ish over here, and you can use grep or awk or sed, whatever your favorite tool is. For me is JQ because it gets right to the point. I'm going to do entries, and I'm going to say ID because that will give me a qualifying thing right there. And then I can just pipe it into something else and count them how many lines. So I have 17 snapshots. So that's just a nice and easy way. Hopefully that answers your question.
So okay, another one out there is how long does it take to calculate the space used by snapshots? Is it instant or does it take time? It will take time. As you have, in Joe's case here, we have, 17 snapshots out there. This is going to go fairly quick. As you do get larger quantities of snapshots, and if you are doing things where they're taking multiple policies over multiple directories or multiple policies in the same directory, trying to calculate that it takes a little bit of time out there. We're not talking hours ideally, but it's not going to be instantaneous.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Any questions we need to take right now, or can we?
I think the rest of them we can take during the Q&A session at the end.
Oh, good deal. All right, let's talk about how to schedule these snapshots, and we do these with snapshot policies. So these allow really granular control over when your snapshots occur. You know how long they will stick around, and if you want them to be locked or not. So as of 610, sorry, I can't talk right now. 610, we added the ability for you to lock snapshots. I will spend some time talking about that specifically, but just hold keep this in mind here. You can have multiple policies per directory. So you can have a daily snapshot, you can have a weekly snapshot that covers the same directory that is covered by a hourly or a minute policy. So policies are required if you want to do replication with snapshot policy. So this is a type of replication where the actual snapshots and the policy of the snapshots are used to control when data is replicated over to another Qumulo. So these are required. You have to make a policy in advance before you can actually take advantage of that replication. We can have a replication-based webinar in the future, but just keep this in mind. So you can combine the two and get some extra functionality out of two different features here. And I mean, really good piece of advice is that if you plan on using replication, you should plan on using policies. The temptation is to use continuous replication and just have it go and move data all the time. But realistically, for most environments, this is not always ideal. So if you combine replications with snapshot policies, I think you get better results for your replication workflows. And this is a big one. Don't forget to set expiration dates. So you don't want your snapshots sticking around forever unless that's exactly what you intended. So let's take a peek at the UI and see how you create policies. So I have my user interface. You go over here, starting at the dashboard, you go to cluster, snapshots. I have a view of all my saved snapshots. And a really cool thing that was added some time ago, if you've been around our product for a while, you might find this really kind of interesting. It might have flown under the radar here. But we have the ability to filter what you see. So you can do this by name. So I can say SMB stuff. So only the directories, the snapshots that relate to this particular policy show up. I can pick the creation time. So my oldest to the newest. I can do it by policy name. I can see what directory is being covered. So I think I can do SMB on there. And so you have lots of nice ways to really kind of reduce just how much stuff is showing up on the screen. This is really nice. And then once you have your filter set, you can actually just do a bulk check right there and then delete everything. So you can take a bulk action on all the items on the screen based on whatever your filter return. So over one tab here is our snapshot policy. And this is where we actually schedule our snapshots. So I'm going to create a policy and you can give it some name. I'm going to call this root and I'm going to apply it to my root directory and I can start typing some stuff and it will, actually I'm going to do a policy on my secret folder here. And I'm going to say secret saver. I'm going to say I want to take a snapshot every day, but I can set it hourly or less. The most aggressive frequency is going to be 1 minute. Obviously, if you take a snapshot every minute, you're going to have yourself a whole bunch of snapshots. And it's not unreasonable to think that you can hit 40,000 snapshot limit very quickly if you set a 1 minute policy that doesn't expire for multiple days. So I will set my policy to be every day. So every day at midnight, actually, let me do 23:59. The time zone is based on the time zone of your browser. So be mindful of that. This is if you're dealing with globally distributed groups of users or you have admins in different countries. These you're taking the set time zone here to your local time zone, which is the local time on your machine. So keep that in mind. Very important. You can set your system to UTC time, and then this browser is going to follow along and show you UTC time, which is what the cluster uses internally. And then I wanted to take it every day, but nothing happens on Saturday and Sunday, so I'm going to leave that alone. And I want to delete each snapshot automatically after 1 week. So I'm going to have 5 snapshots in this week, and each individual snapshot, as it is taken, will have its own individual expiration. So keep an eye on this because we'll talk about this later. This is the ability to lock a snapshot. But really cool down here at the bottom, you also have the ability to name your snapshot and change the name the way you want to. So you do that with these variables here. So in this case, I want to have my ID first. And as I start typing, a little menu, a very helpful menu pops up. I want to do ID, and I can give it some extra characters. And I'm going to say that this is the day. And then month. And then year. And then I guess it will be helpful for me to have the actual name of the snapshot, because otherwise I won't know what is covering this thing. So policy. Cool. So I have an example of what that would look like in the nomenclature here. So you do whatever characters make the sense to you. We're all kind of system admin types, so we like dashes, we don't like commas, and do it, make it look like that. I'm going to put a there. And then I can create my policy. So you can enable the policy upon creation, or you can actually pre-stage a policy and then turn it on later, which is kind of nice. So I'll create a policy. Now I have a secret saver policy that is happening here, covering my folder secret. It's going to trigger at some time, and it'll be deleted after 1 week. So nice and easy to set these policies. Then you also have the ability to edit the policy after the fact. And that includes renaming the policy if you didn't like this naming format. Now, this will not retroactively rename your policy. So an example of this is that if I go to my save snapshots here, you see that in the beginning here, I changed my mind of how I wanted to name this particular policy, which is covering this is the same policy, but I decided to rename it. So I did not rename the original snapshot. So this is the way to create your policies.
Now, one of the questions we do have out there from Kelly Sherwood, do separate snapshot policies wrap into each other? So if I have, for example, on slash, the root of the file system, and then I have another one here on SMB stuff, how is that going to interact? Those policies they are different as far as the file system is concerned. So you're effectively keeping 2 copies of your data, if you will, or 2 backups, or 2 archives, or 2, however you want to phrase it, 2 snapshots of your data at that point. Now, if I go off and delete them from SMB stuff, they are still locked by the policy that took place on the root of the file system, slash. So, while there is not a limitation to the number of snapshot policies that I can take, very quickly you can run into a limitation as to what is reasonable and humanly discernible, if you will.
Right. So you're looking, if you have a great many thousands, which is totally possible for you to have in here, you might have some accounting nightmares to kind of keep tabs on, especially when it's time for you to clear some of these snapshots. So it does pay to kind of think through this stuff. Cool. So back on this, one really cool feature that we have is that we have a Snapshot Diff API, where in, you can actually see the differences between two different snapshots. You can actually inspect and see what the differences are. So you have the ability to track the new files and objects or subdirectories in a particular directory covered by Snapshot, or you can actually inspect which byte ranges were changed. Now, the inspection of the byte ranges is a little bit less useful for a human, but it's quite useful for software that does backup. So this API is used quite a bit by many third-party backup and data applications. So Commvault, for example, has integration with the Snapshot Diff API, but you yourself can use that. So I'm going to show you how that would look. So if you remember, I have a number of different policies here. So I'm going to compare two different snapshots. I'm going to compare snapshot 7 to the newest 21 here. So if I run this real quick, I'm going to say QQ snapshot diff. I will give it the newer snapshot ID is 21. The older is 7. And this tells me what is different. So it's telling me that between these two snapshots, I created a subdirectory and I modified this particular directory here. So you can compare all these guys. So I can compare 20 and 21. They're really close together. And you see there's no changes. Nothing happens. So I know that between these two guys, there's nothing different. And I can actually maybe go as far back as 14. And you see that there's no changes between these two guys. So now I know that between 14 and 20, there's basically just no changes. So if I were to remove between 14 and 21, I really wouldn't lose any data because there's 0 changes between them. And I go back a little bit more. I'm going to go down to 11. And now I'm starting to see changes that happen at this moment in time. So this is kind of a cool way for you to understand really what is in these snapshots. So in this case, you can see that I made some changes to an actual document and I created brand new ones. And then there's an operation modify to the actual directory, and the modify always shows up when you do a create, because when you create an object, you're modifying the container that the object lives in. So the snapshot diff is pretty slick, and it's pretty easy to use once you kind of work your brain around with it a little bit. Where's my window? Cool. So here's everybody's favorite topic. How do I bring this data back? You want to give it a go, Will?
Sure. So first and foremost, you can always navigate to the .snapshot directory. It's not a real directory per se. It's kind of a pseudo directory, if you will, that gets generated out there when snapshots are taken. And you can simply go to the point where in Joe's case, we had SMB stuff, for example. So what we'd do is we'd navigate to SMB stuff, either on the Linux side of the Unix or on the Windows side. There'd be a .snapshot hidden directory out there. We'd go into that. We'd see our snapshots out there, delve into the snapshot, grab the data we're interested in, move on with life, restore from there. That works great. The problem is you're dealing with protocols at that point. Protocols are slow. If you have just a single file to pull back, we do have a QQFS copy command. Again, syntax is there on the screen. You can screenshot that, or we can post in your channel later. Basically, you supplied a source snapshot. In Joe's case, we're dealing with, say, 12. If we know the path to our file, we give it the path out there, and then path to destination. Now you can restore it to the same spot, the original location if you want. Or if you're looking to, say, pull something out of a snapshot to see what it looks like, you can do that as well, and you'll restore it to some completely separate destination. If the file still exists, but you're just trying to overwrite it, there's an overwrite flag that you can add on to that guy, which will let you just forcefully write it over top. If you're looking for more than simply a single file, and you're looking to keep it out of the protocol stack, on the GitHub, there is something we call the QWalk script. I'm sure a lot of you have experienced that. It does require a separate system to run on. You don't run it on the Qumulo. You'd run it on a box that has Python loaded on it. And if you're running on a virtual machine, I highly recommend giving it a lot of memory. And what this will do is make API calls out to the Qumulo and restore that data for you. On the QWalk GitHub page, it gives examples for how to get into all of those. If you are curious about how to find the GitHub page, you can certainly ask anyone out on the Slack channel where it's at. There are references to it, or my personal favorite, if you go to Qumulo.pizza, it will take you to the QWalk GitHub script. Well, inside baseball there.
Nice. I did not know that. That's pretty cool. So let's take a look at FS copy, right? So we're going to use a really quick example, and this is pretty cool because it works pretty handy. The snapshot diff actually will come in really, really handy here. So I want to do a QQFS copy, and anytime you run one of these commands for the first time, I always recommend you give it a -- help right there to see what kind of options you have available. And I'm going to do QQFS copy, and I'm going to give it a snapshot ID. So source snapshot is going to be snapshot folder 20. And the source path, I can just copy right from me here. I'm going to copy my life as a bat, Batman's memoirs, and I'm actually going to copy it to the root directory. I don't need to send it to the same place it came from. So now, oh, target exists. Oh, wait, be very careful. I didn't want to overwrite my root. Bat.text. You got to give it a new name for the destination here. There you go. So the copy happens using our server-side copy, where the data does not need to traverse the internet to get to my machine and then back. Then the copying is done. And if I were to go to my client, I would see that I have a copy of this file now in my in my root directory of the Qumulo. So it's a pretty cool way of copying single individual files if you don't want to. If you want to use the QQ CLI, that's the way that we give you to copy this data. Now we're talking about the hidden .snapshot directory. So I'm going to pop into a Linux box here. And I believe I already have this same cluster mounted. So I'm going to CD over to it. And if I ls this directory here, so I'm actually going to CD over to SND stuff. If I ls it and show hidden objects, you see I don't see anything. It doesn't show up to a directory listing, but I can CD into .snapshot, which is a hidden directory that does not get returned. So now I'm inside of the .snapshot directory, and I have access to all the individual snapshots. Their naming matches the policy that for the snapshots that exist in this place. So I could CD into number 20 and see the previous versions of what things used to look like in there. So I can CD into Batman, unless that, and I can retrieve these objects. Now, again, snapshots are immutable. No individual user, including admin, can ever go into these directories and delete things. So I cannot do this number here, sudo -s, become root, and then I'm going to rm rf vengeful destruction, destroy everything. I can't do that. So this stuff is safe in there. We're not going to be able to delete any of these files. You can't go into a snapshot and start deleting and destroying stuff. So we can't do that. But that's an example of how to go in directly and actually just grab some stuff from the snapshot directory from an NFS client. We also have some other options here that we'll show you. Actually, let's talk about some of the options here. What methods should you use to recover your data? You can do QQFS copy. The pros is that it's right on box. You don't have to install any dependencies. You can just pop into one of the nodes, which is, is just always available there. You can go in and run the commands. It is fast because it's using server-side copy, so all of that operation happens entirely inside of the cluster. The con is that it's a single file only, so I cannot point to a directory and restore a directory. I would have to use some logic in my code to find all the entries and then copy all of the entries. This is kind of where QWalk comes in. Now, I could use a SMB or NFS client, just like I showed you with the NFS client. And the pros is that I can copy multiple files and directories using the tools that I already know how to use, CP, rsync, what have you. And it's self-service. Your end users can go directly in there and grab the files that they need. The con is this is that it's protocol bound, meaning that the data, you can only copy things as fast as your protocol client can make the operations happen. You can also use a QWalk script, which is fast because it's API based. You can do multiple files and directories. The con is using QWalk is that there's a barrier to entry. You need a separate computer to run the stuff in, and it requires Python and requires a slight bit of Python knowledge, not a whole bunch, but you do have to be comfortable with getting Python up and running and making this guy work. Now, if you have to do a massive file system recovery due to some emergency event, QWalk is going to be the thing to use.
And to that point, where it is a separate system, one of the things we hate to see is customers be put in a situation where they require immediate need for something, and the only answer we have for them is this script here, but we have to set something up. When you're in the heat of the moment, you don't want to be log jammed by having to set up a separate Linux box, for example, so you can run some QWalk script. So, if you can, I would recommend trying it out in advance. Set something up out there, run it a few times, get handy with it, and see exactly what it's doing. So, should the unfortunate time arrive, we all know it's a when, not an if, you are prepared for it at that point.
And QWalk also does a bunch of other stuff other than just recover data from snapshots, so you probably want to check it out anyways. And for your Windows users, you do have support for previous versions. So this allows self-service. You can actually just go right into there and grab the data yourself. It uses server-side copy, so the copy is happening completely behind the scenes inside of the cluster itself, not through your client. And the one catch for this, though, is that snapshots, to be seen by previous versions, they have to start at the SMB share, the root of the SMB share. So let me show you what that looks like on a Windows client here. So I am sitting over here with my user Batman, and I'm writing my memoirs. And I decided that, well, man, I like some of the changes that I made before in a previous document. So I'm in my folder here. I can just right click, go to properties, previous versions, and I have a whole bunch of different changes here. And let me take a look back in time and see what that directory looked like, about 15 minutes ago. And I can take a look at these previous versions of the documents and say, oh, okay, here's some changes that I did. I think maybe I like this previous version better than I like the other one, but I could restore that file. I can just either drag it or I can restore an entire file or an entire directory. So you got some self-service options for your end users. But again, this is an important distinction here is that I created the snapshot policy at the root of this share. This guy has one, this guy has one. So currently, if I were to go in as an admin and create the policy here, I would not have the snapshot policies just here. So this might change in the future, but right now as it stands, you have to create the snapshot policy at the root itself. So that's just previous versions of Windows is nice and easy, kind of really slick way of recovering data as a self-service. It's not a thing that unfortunately is available for other SMB clients. So if you have a Mac SMB client or a Linux SMB client, you still have to go into the .snapshot directory to retrieve that data. So let's talk about snapshot locking. So snapshot locking is something that is new, came out in 6.10. And this allows you to lock a snapshot with a combination of private and public keys. So basically, they are ECDSA 256 keys. These locked snapshots are unable to be deleted or have their expiration time changed by anyone that does not have the private key. This doesn't matter what user you are. You can be the built-in admin into the node. You still would not be able to delete these snapshots. They can be applied to policies, and we're ensuring that these are safe snapshots. So basically, if you're looking at a ransomware mitigation policy or a strategy, you want to make sure that even if somebody compromises the passwords of your cluster, that no one will be able to completely delete all your data because they won't have access to your private keys, or hopefully they won't have access to your private keys. So this is an extra layer of security on top of that, and it's a highly requested feature, and we finally added in 610. I definitely recommend you take a look at it. We'll give you a quick demo of what that looks like in a second here. So in the next release later in 611, we also introduced the ability to lock snapshots in the replication target. So if you're using snapshot policies and you're replicating a locked snapshot, you have the option to then also lock the snapshot on the target automatically, saving you kind of the data that's being replicated is also protected with a lock. So to take advantage of snapshot locking, you have to add a key into your system, and I won't go into the details of how they add the key. We have a doc article that covers that. Won't make that available for you, but I went through the process here, and I want to list my keys. So I want to quickly list the keys, and you can see that I've added a key. I went through the process of adding a key. And now once I have this key can be used for a number of things. And right now, I'm going to take this key and I'm going to lock a snapshot with it. So I can go back here to my secret policy. So here, let me go to snapshot policy, and I'm going to edit my policy. And I can actually click right on there, and you see QQ key, which is what I created previously. This key right here, key number 2. And now I'm going to lock this guy. Now note that I have an expiration policy. So after 1 week, these snapshots will be deleted automatically. If I set it to never and I lose my key, I lose my private key, I don't have my private key anymore, and I can't verify that I can delete the snapshots, we're going to have a bad time because we did not build a backdoor into your system to be able to delete these things. So please do not lose your private keys if you intend to lock a snapshot that never expires. So I'm just going to hit save. And now if I go to my saved snapshots, once those triggers, you'd see a little lock symbol here. So I locked this one previously before. I'm doing exactly the thing I said you shouldn't do, which is the never. And I can't really delete it because it's locked. The delete icon is gone. If I wanted to delete the snapshots, then I would have to go through the snapshot policies here and actually go through the process of providing my private key or verifying my public key with a signature verification. And then I can run the command and delete the snapshot. But right now, this snapshot is protected. I cannot go in there and delete it. So it's nice and safe in there. So this is something that's super important, especially in this age of ransomware. Perhaps a disgruntled employee wants to go and flip a table on the way out the door as he's getting fired. This will protect your data from any number of scenarios where you don't want that data to be deleted. Okay, Will, take it away.
Oh man, I was typing an answer out here.
Oh, sorry. We'll cover
All
a lot
right,
of this.
now you're good. You're good. You're good. So again, just general best practices. We've gone over all of these. It bears repeating a lot of them. Snapshot policies are your friend. You can think of it that way. When you are setting up schedules, even if you're not using replication, I'd still highly recommend using policies out there. Expiration dates can be your friend or your worst enemy. As Joe stated, if you have them set to never, you're going to have a bad time, especially if you have something locked out there with snapshot locking and lose your keys out there. Not a lot we can do about that. With with locking itself, snapshot locking, I would recommend a 6.1.1 release or later. That does give you the ability to do the replication portion of it. And additionally, it'll actually show up in the GUI a lot better with that little lock on there. If you do it on 6.1.03, you are going to be limited to doing everything via the CLI, which some people are great with and some people aren't. So, if you can get on a newer release, great. Highly recommend it. As I stated with the QWalk script, test things before the time comes down to it. It's kind of the running joke that, we're all in storage here, and yet how often do we actually have offsite backups? We tell customers to do this all the time. Do we actually do it? I know I'm guilty of not doing it. I'm also guilty of not testing any of my backups at my own house, but that's me. Your stuff's a lot more important than mine, so make sure you test it in advance. And the final point I'd throw out there, the visibility of the .snapshot directory, depending on whether or not you want that seen by your end users, there's a SMB setting to go ahead and flip that out there. From the Unix side, it's obviously not seen by default, so you can kind of get away with it there. But certainly on the SMB side, you will want to change that up just to keep prying eyes out of there too.
So there's a super handy thing here. So in SMB modify settings, you got a whole bunch of options, but the one that we are interested in right now is that you can set the visibility of the snapshot directory. And for my particular case, I actually have it set to hidden because I don't want a background Windows process, like I'm changing permissions on a bunch of files. I don't want it to stumble across a .snapshot directory because Windows is going to freak out because you cannot change anything in there. And it might break my long-running process. So one step that I take is that I set it to hidden, where you won't be able to stumble across that accidentally. So when Windows is doing some kind of background process and changing files, you won't be able to find that hidden .snapshot directory and mess it up. But you can still go there by hand. You can still go into the .snapshot directory and get to it. Now, if you want to prevent the .snapshot directory from being accessed over SMB altogether, you can just disable it. And it's nice and easy. So SMB modify settings, snapshot directory mode, hidden, disabled, what have you. So let's take a look at the Q&A while we have some time. We've got 5 minutes left. So Mark asked the question, are there any plans to include per snapshot sizes in the UI? I believe there are some plans. I could not tell you when that stuff will end up, but we definitely will let our UI guys know that this is something that you're interested in. Mandy, if you could jot that down, please. You want to take the next one? Will?
Yeah, so our snapshot, everything's moving on me. Our snapshots from replicated directories considered in the space consumption reports. They are considered in the donut, if that's the space consumption report you're referring to. They are considered snapshots on the system. So I would, if you're pulling a separate report from possibly the GitHub one, that should be reflected in there as well.
Yeah, so snapshots, when they have data in them, they are consuming space. So if you have many replication policies and you have snapshots being taken on the target, then those snapshots are consuming space in either cluster, and you'll see them in the donut here. So snapshots that have weight are consuming data, and they show up in here no matter what their origin is. So where's the key stored? So the storage of the key really is up to your system. So we do not want to store that private key in the cluster, obviously. You can use it with PKI. I know we're doing some work I don't even know if Will might know, but I thought we shipped some support for specific PKI infrastructures to manage keys. But you would
I
do
believe it's a
treat.
coming thing.
Sorry, say again.
I believe it's a coming thing.
Okay, yeah, we're building integration with PKI private key infrastructure systems. That's something that it will be integrated with the different systems out there. But today, as it stands, you want to treat those keys as you would treat any other SSH key. So treat it the same way. So you cannot delete a key. You can delete the public key if you're an admin and you have access. You have the admin role. You have the right to delete the key, and you can delete the public key, but you cannot necessarily delete the private key. If you delete the public key, you can regenerate the key because it's the public key is going to have the same hash. So things jive in the end. Because in the end, we're actually not concerned about that specific key or that specific ID, but we want the actual SSL key itself. So even if it gets deleted, you can regenerate it because you have the private key. So Kelly has an interesting question here. Have you seen this, Will?
Oh, have I ever? Kelly and I
All
are
right.
intimate on this.
So let's read the question out loud here. Kelly asked, "We have an issue with snapshots that are replicated across clusters, and I thought they would be the same size, but they are not. Should they be? What do you say, Will?"
So there's two parts to that. There's the data part and the metadata part. The data itself will be the same size. The we're gonna let me back up. We're going to replicate sparseness if you have sparse files out there. All of that will be transferred. The metadata, depending on how it's written out, that can change. Typically, we see metadata smaller on the destination than on the source, if I recall correctly. Now, there are also cases where the data blocks used may be a different number. Depending on if it's a lot of small files, they may take up only an extent of data on the source side. And then depending on how that gets written out on the destination side, that may differ there as well.
So the short answer is it's complicated, but there's a reason why they could vary. So did you say that when we replicate sparse files that the empty space becomes whole space on the replicated side, or am I incorrect?
No, the empty space will stay empty space.
Okay.
If you have any questions or follow-ups, please feel free to reach out in your dedicated Slack channel or in that customer conversations Slack channel. We are more than happy to continue this conversation with you there. Thanks, everyone.